Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order at this point for the purpose of electing Vice Chair and Chair of the committee. May I accept a nomination at this time for the position of Chair? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you. Nominate Councillor Stroud for Chair.
Are there any other nominations at this time for position of Chair? Seeing Councillor Hutchinson's not on the committee. All right, so I'll close nominations and I'll call the question of electing Councillor Stroud as Chair of the committee. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. And as Councillor Stroud relocates, I'll look for a nomination for the position of Vice Chair, please. Councillor McLaren. And would someone like to second that? I need a seconder for Councillor Stroud. All right. Seeing no other nominations, I will close the nomination process and we'll vote on electing Councillor Kiley as Vice Chair. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries.
Mr. Clerk, do we have quorum?
Mr. Chair, there is quorum.
I think there's 4 of us and we need 4, correct? So if any of the members of the committee leave, then we no longer have quorum and the meeting will be over. Yeah. The clerk tells me one of you may need to leave early and that's fine, so we'll take that into account and we may have to put some of the items or one of the items that is less time sensitive to the end, and that way if we lose quorum, we don't lose any time sensitive items. But first we need to approve the agenda, so need a mover and a seconder. Kiley and Chappelle. Maybe I'll ask the clerk. Mr. Clerk, which of the items are time sensitive?
I believe the only item that's time sensitive is the municipal discounts due to the calendar year changing shortly, but staff can comment further if there's any other items.
So municipal discounts is several items starting at E. So it's E, F, and G all have to do with municipal discounts. It's not time sensitive. Okay. All right. Well, if it's, then we'll just go in order and see how far we get. Any proposed changes? Seeing none, we'll vote on the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We need to confirm the minutes from last meeting on October 10th. Need a mover from that meeting. Councillor Kiley, seconded. Councillor McLaren. Any errors or omissions from the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the minutes. All those in favor? Did I see your hand, Councillor Kiley? Yes. And that carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Any delegations or briefings? No delegations or briefings, so we go over the page to business, which is number 8. First up is Rideau Crest Home Board of Management. So we need a mover and a seconder to resolve into the board. Move by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor McLaren. All those in favor? And that carries. We are now the Board of Management for Rideau Crest Home. There is an information report and there's a member, staff member from the home here to introduce the report. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is the 5th report that is provided to the Rideau Crest Board of Management for 2019. This report contains information from September through to the end of October of this year. Rideau Crest Home has maintained an overall occupancy rate of 98.91% from January through to the end of October. During this reporting period, Rideau Crest had 3 incidents reportable to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and 1 written complaint. The Ministry of Health was in the home October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. During the course of the inspection, the compliance officer reviewed critical incidents reported by the home. The home was found to be in compliance and there was no findings as a result of this inspection. As of the end of October, there were 455 people on the wait list for the home. There were no outbreaks declared during this reporting period. The home had its annual fire inspection completed by Kingston Fire and Rescue on October 15th. There were no orders received from this inspection, and the home is awaiting a final report. The home also had its annual mock egress evacuation exercise for fire safety completed on October 17th. Kingston Fire and Rescue was on site to observe the exercise. There was no findings from this observation, and the home was able to evacuate a hallway of 22 residents within the allotted time frame. As of the end of October, Rita Crest Home has spent 80.67% of its municipal contribution, which is $154,000 underspent. Timing differences contributing to the underspend include timing of payroll costs, which are higher in the last months of the fiscal year due to the timing of 2 statutory holidays and lieu bank payouts. And I'm open to questions if there's any.
Thank you. So now questions from members of the board are in order about the information report. Councillor Chappelle.
So you having had the opportunity to tour, I was just wondering if you have an update on the flooring that you were working on improvements, just if you could just give a quick update.
So at this point, stopped the flooring project. We are, the contractor that was in place has withdrawn from the project, and we are looking to re-RFP that in hopefully very early in the new year.
Thank you. I have a question about something that's in the report. It says the nursing budget is $28,000 overspent, $48,000 in wages, which is primarily due to a one-time labor cost. If you could just elaborate about the one-time labor cost.
Did have a labor cost which dates back to about 20 years ago. There was a concern with the WSIB case that has come and been finalized, and the home is absorbing that cost at this point for this fiscal year.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the board? So now we go to members of the public. No members of the public? There's nothing to vote on because it's an information report, so we just need a motion to rise from the Board of Management. Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Kiley, all those in favor? And that carries. We're back to administrative policies. Thank you very much. We do have an ex officio council member here. Councillor Hutchison, welcome. When we get to items that you would like to speak to, just let me know. So the next item is the supplemental information report on closed meetings, key procedural elements. Just a note about the agenda. So items B, C, and D all have to do with the closed meetings. There's 3 reports. There's the only one that's new is B. Is that correct? Yeah. So B, this report 20-006 is the new report, which is followed from a motion. And the older reports are included in the package for context. And this new report is an information report, so there's nothing to vote on there. But there may be some questions from members of the committee about what's in this new report in relation to the other reports. So we go to members of the committee for questions. This is information report, so it's questions. We get an introduction from staff, and if you want to speak to the report, wait till we get when we're done questions, we will have a round to speak to the reports. So we'll get an introduction from staff about these items. It would be Ms. McLeod.
So the report before you today, AP 2006, is in response to request when the matter was last before this committee in August, and 2 additional pieces of information in a general sense are filed are included in the report. We have at page 11 of the overall package, at page 7 of the report, a flow chart that is describing the process of moving items, illustrated by an example of an LPAT appeal as it moves through council. And through the assistance of the committee clerk, we were able to put it on the screen. And what you have is the chart divided into the first and second halves. So when we go through this information that was discussed in the last meeting, we'll see in the chart that the first thing that will happen in closed session is a closed session report which describes the appeal and then proposes a negotiated route move forward. Council deliberates on that and directs staff to negotiate as was described and deliberated upon. Once those deliberations are done, staff will provide a second closed session report on the matter and describing the success or lack of success through the negotiation process. Council deliberates and either agrees with the position or asks staff to seek an adjusted outcome based on their council's understanding of the outcome of negotiations and the range of possibilities that would be desired. So basically, as you see in the flowchart, this would send us back and we would have a further subsequent report. So we have a cycle of reports and meetings in closed session until council comes to an understanding that it is satisfied with the planning principles if it's an LPAT matter, and then we move on. So if the clerk would, committee clerk would be able to move to the bottom half of the page, then we're still in closed session, and we have a discussion about the implications of moving to an open session and what can and cannot be discussed. And this ties into the second issue reviewed in the latest report, in the sense that most LPAT discussions at this point are not full settlements of matters, but partial settlements, either settling issues as related to one other party to the appeal or more, or one issue to the appeal, so that it is taken off the table, resolved in part, but the rest of the process continues towards the LPAT hearing. These without prejudice agreements are not binding on the LPAT. They're contractual agreements between the parties. And once that is explained and once the parameters of what is possible for an open discussion occurs, then council will vote again in closed session. That closed session discussion is there agreement to move into open session based on that discussion of parameters and expectations. It may be in certain circumstances that the answer is no, we're now no longer going to move into open session, so we move to the side to 7A and staff act on the direction. If it moves into open session, council will debate without disclosing specifics of the negotiated settlement, but councilors would discuss basic principles, general principles of policy and how they may or may not support the without prejudice negotiation based on those policy issues. Each case would have specifics and guidance that would be described, so it becomes a little difficult again to unpack what that would look like in a general sense, but it would be at a very high level the distinction between discussing an open session policy issues and specifics of the negotiated without prejudice settlement. Then council moves to the open session, has that discussion based on the extent that they're comfortable with, and votes. The second portion of the report's update is just unpacking the idea of without prejudice settlements. And the key part is, well, there's certainly the benefit that you're seeking as legal counsel, but also a good participant in any dispute. You're seeking to resolve issues as you move along, to shorten the time that you're having to be in front of a tribunal, but also to reconcile and understand that there are opportunities to actually take things out of the dispute. Because it's a partial settlement, and because in an LPAT situation you would be understanding that the tribunal's hearing would continue, it is unfair to the tribunal, it is unfair to the other parties to prejudice their positions and the city's position by disclosing these elements. The evidence still would move forward through the LPAT hearing. The hearing would occur, but however the arrangement is made, the elements that have been resolved would no longer be in dispute between the parties. If we were to breach a without prejudice settlement, well, in fact, it would undermine the reason for having the negotiation in the first place. You would put the dispute back into the place it was before the negotiation began to try to resolve elements of the overall disagreement. That, in turn, depending on the nature of the information that's disclosed, could be claimed to be a harm that has been done to one or the other parties, that the city, by breaching, has caused an unfairness that has in turn caused them some sort of legal damage to which they might have the right to compensation. It's important to also note, it would also be that put the city in a more general position that we would lose our ability to present ourselves as a good negotiator seeking to resolve issues before a full and final hearing. So subject to your questions, that would be my presentation on this supplemental information report brought to you today.
Maybe I'll just ask a very general question based on the LPAT example. Say we went through everything, voted to have the open session, and then in the open session, a member said, the policy speaks to an element of, and so specific, so for example, height or something. And they say that would it be a breach to say that this proposal, this negotiated proposal, is asking us to make an exception on that policy element, and that is either acceptable or not acceptable? Is that the type of wording it would be, or would that be too specific?
I think you would be dealing with a specific case again, but not, to answer, the idea would be you may be wanting to say, or your concern was too much height or too much mass. You may be guided to say, I have concerns about the implications of massing, whether it's, but without getting into the indication of where it is in the overall mass that you're unhappy with. It is a general question, though, you've asked, and it becomes difficult to give you kind of specific guidance, but that would be the idea, is that prior to going into open session, council will have every opportunity to get the right advice for this particular matter so that you're free to express your understanding, if you wish, in open session, while not upsetting the negotiated settlement.
So any reference to elements in the proposal that may be interpreted as contrary to policy, you'd have to be very careful how you spoke to them without revealing the details of the proposal.
So you might say something like, I can't get into the specifics of what we discussed in closed session, but I can tell you, A, I'm concerned in a very general level that there's a policy issue that this doesn't seem to align with. And depending on the guidance you get on the specific case, you may say that policy issue is A, B, or C. But I would expect you would not be wishing to go very much beyond that. So in effect, you're able to put your objection on the record, but you're not able to unpack it to the degree that it undermines the usefulness of the negotiation process.
By saying things like, I'm not comfortable making a policy exception in this case because of general size of the proposal or something like that.
Or the building is purple. You
Right.
wouldn't, if for some reason we agree and negotiate and in closed session council agrees that a purple building is perfectly acceptable, nothing against purple, but it's a good example, then if we agree that that's the element it shouldn't be discussed, people shouldn't be blurting out purpleness.
Right, and so that would be discussed in closed session, giving us clear guidelines of what we should not be saying in open session.
Correct. And if there was movement towards inadvertently, it has been the occasion, myself and others, raising the hand so people would be watching an open session to see, I think you're moving into an area that's inappropriate. So we would hope to be sort of not referees in any sense, but continue the guidance even into the open session in a way to make sure that even inadvertently, the kind of information that could undermine a settlement doesn't get disclosed.
Okay, so a follow-up question. Consequences to council members who may inadvertently breach confidentiality despite the warnings and so on. What are we looking at?
It's really not a matter of individual. It could be such a matter that could be a code of conduct issue. But it would be council as a whole and the municipal corporation that would face potential, not necessarily definite, but potential legal ramifications. So you do have cases where a disclosure in open session causes a party to believe that their interests have been harmed in such a way that it's beyond the harm of just the case into their business life or into their greater, a greater issue.
A harm has been done.
And that they, as a result, have suffered certain damages that have legal recourse in themselves. That would be brought against the municipal corporation as a whole, not individual councillors.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Councillor McLaren?
Thank you. So from what I'm getting from you, you're suggesting that the settlement process is, that it must be in secret and all of this stuff is legislated to us. Is that correct?
Well, it's not legislated in the sense it's not under a statute, but it is in the nature of coming to a binding agreement between parties. And so, first of all, it's important to understand that the without prejudice negotiations result in an agreement. It's an agreement between the city and another party, or not the city, but other parties amongst themselves. So your damages for a harm that results from not following through with the contract are the damages that you have for breach of contract or breach of confidentiality, which is a slightly different cause of action. But it would be a court case around that kind of thing if the harm was so great to cause that kind of ancillary harm to the individual on the other side.
So if it's not in legislation, that means that we could change the rules of the procedures of how we come to a negotiated settlement. Is that correct?
It's not correct, because these things are adjudicated not based on the statute, but the common law. So there are principles around how you manage your life once you've entered into a contract that are not only defined by the words in the contract themselves, but court rulings about the proper practice of somebody who has entered into a contract.
Right. So this is before we enter into the contract. When we're negotiating to enter into that contract, we negotiate certain things about the contract. We put some of them on that we've apparently decided, we put them on off the table, as you said. And then we negotiated other things, and then eventually the full contract gets negotiated. Those rules by which we put something on the table or take something off the table, or what we can do with them when they're on or off the table, are those malleable?
You are entering into a without prejudice negotiation. You do enter, if it's successful, you do enter into an agreement, even though it's not a full settlement of the whole dispute, the whole appeal. That portion that you've confirmed a process, a way to manage that takes it out of the dispute, is itself resolved by an agreement. Okay. So during that process, even if you don't reach that agreement, you have shared information, and you've shared information in a good faith setting. That good faith setting creates vulnerabilities to each of the parties that each of the parties can suffer. Mm-hmm. So that cause of action is called breach of confidence. So if you do something and use the information you've obtained in that good faith settlement to the detriment of the other party, that itself is a wrong that can get remedied through a court process.
So 2 points on that. It sounds then that we could enter into a process of negotiation without that prejudice part, without prejudice, and still have good faith. One of the other things we could add is anything that is discussed doesn't get discussed in public if there's no agreement. Could that work, or could that be at least intellectually possible?
Well, and I'm not making fun about lawyers, but what I'm saying is, remember, it's not what's intellectually possible, it's what we are guided to do by the greater common law that we have to work within. So the precedents exist, the expectation is a good faith negotiation has the following characteristics. Those characteristics are defined for us, and we cannot override them. If the other side to that negotiation agrees, for example, theoretically, that this component of our negotiation, we're fine with you talking about that later, even if this deal doesn't proceed, you can have that kind of negotiation. Because sometimes you want to know in the negotiation, what's the thing that would really harm me? What's the thing I really better not say? Could we clarify that? So that can be an element of negotiation too. But the overriding idea is we are, as a government body, bound by rules that tell us how to negotiate in good faith, and there are a large body of rulings that describe what happens when you don't follow that good faith negotiation through.
Okay, so it sounds like you can negotiate certain aspects out if the other party agrees to that.
Correct, but that you would want extremely clear, and if that was an element of negotiation, then when we go back to the chart, they clearly discussed B, because that's going to be something that you're very clear on, that this thing that the parties have agreed isn't full.
And part of the crux of this problem, we're dealing with a public body, the Corporation of the City of Kingston, whose principles, in a sense, are the people, like the public, and if they're not part of, at least in principle or in theory, the negotiations, it's in a sense like leaving a person who would be in a negotiation out. And so part of the open part of government would suggest that we have to make allowances for that whenever possible, which is why this is troubling as it stands right now to me.
Remember, we're just in questions.
Yeah.
There is a recommendation we have to vote on that's in item C. At that point, it will be moved and people can make comments, but at this point, it's just questions about the supplemental report.
Getting there. So a second set of questions. With regards to partial elements in secret, you mentioned that it was unfair to the tribunal and to the other party. But at the same time, it strikes me that it's the current way, it's actually unfair to the people, the public, because it's being kept secret from them and it's their money essentially that we're dealing with. That's the direction that I think we should be moving in, is to open it up and change that. Is that possible to set new standards such that if we want to negotiate, these are the terms that we want to negotiate under because this is what the public would like for the sake of openness. And it may not be as much as we'd like, but it would be better than what it is now. So, in a sense, moving common law in a more open direction. Is that possible? Is that something that we can set?
Two different things. It is possible, but we may not be able to set it. So, for one reality could be that were an issue such that council didn't wish to proceed in this way, it's always free to council to not enter into the negotiations and say, we don't want to know your secret information. So don't give it to us, don't share it. And then we're just going to move forward with the dispute on that basis. And the dispute would be in public through the public hearing process. So that's already available. I don't know that unless we would find a compliant party that would enter into an agreement to negotiate on the basis that the following items are available to be freely spoken to. But again, it would be difficult to understand why the other party would come to us with that. Because to enter into one of these resolutions of part of a deal or a part of a dispute, you have to have agreement between the parties, not only to the goal, but the process towards the goal. So we may be able to set out expectations that we would wish the deals looked like this, but then nobody would enter into deals with us. It would be certainly an honest and open way to do it, but we would also then miss opportunities to shorten tribunal hearings, not only for ourselves, but the others who are involved. And we're also missing the opportunity to affirm, in an LPAT situation, the understanding that there are simply good planning principles that should be resolved as quickly as possible once they're identified. And that is certainly, in the code of ethics of being a lawyer, you are asked by our ethical guidelines to resolve things where they may be resolved, to not continue. So one of the issues, and it is certainly a tension, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but one of the tensions caused by the desire for openness is openness takes a lot more time, in the sense that if everything has to be explained to all people, you're avoiding the opportunity to resolve things more quickly and earlier. And if it's to the benefit of the public to resolve them earlier, because council's decided that's the case, there is another interest that is served, which is the early resolution.
That's it for now.
So if I what you said in response to his question, if council was not comfortable with the settlement and the details that we received in closed session, we have an option, and that would be to direct staff to say no to the settlement, and in open session we would confirm that, and that then, so that's following this, right? And then if the reason is because of open government reasons, we're not comfortable having this conversation or going any further with the settlement, and if council says we want to debate in open session, but we don't want, basically the settlement, we would have to turn down the settlement, and then we'd be free to say in open session.
So effectively, you would go through the 345A loop a few times, getting the advice, is this a negotiation? But if council's majority decision in closed session was like, we don't want to go there, I'm sorry, like just conclude this and stop reaching out to that other party, that would be then the direction given to staff. And the matter would move forward without the resolution of that portion, even though that was available. But just because it's available doesn't mean it's palatable to council making that decision.
And the consequence of disclosing some of those confidential details in open session as justification for saying no would be that we incur further possible lawsuits.
Correct. So if the idea was, I'm just trying to think of an absurd example, but if the idea was we're not going to enter into discussions of this because literally it's diamond blood money involved, we would not want to go into open session and make accusations about others, but we could say the nature of the business was not something we'd wish to pursue a business relationship with, something to that effect. So it's a euphemism, but it's the one that actually helps us resolve the matter, not moving forward, but also not incurring risks that we would ourselves face further harms for doing that disclosure.
CAO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, maybe one thing to add to what Mr. McLeod, City Solicitor, was indicating is that if council doesn't, first of all, we go to council in closed session because we have an LPAT appeal. So we're dealing with an appeal situation. We present something to council in terms of proposed settlement. If council does not have any interest in pursuing settlement, then council gives that direction, and the next step is pretty simple. It means it goes through an LPAT hearing, unless the appellant decides to go in a different direction. But at that point, that's the process that we follow. There is no other process through which we come back to council. That's where we go. And from that point, all the information is public, because through an LPAT hearing, everything is made public.
So the decision in session becomes between kind of a shortcut scenario where we come to an agreement with the other party in confidence, confidentially, which gets reported out in open session once it's complete without divulging the confidential information. The alternative to that is to vote in closed session against the settlement and have all of the details come out in the LPAT hearing. Okay. Yes, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I appreciate the graphic. It's very helpful. It complements the report quite nicely. So thank you for that. I'm also asking my question as a first-term councillor, so strictly theoretical. I haven't been through this process like some of my colleagues have, so forgive me if my questions are naive. What I'm trying to discern is what in the negotiation wouldn't ultimately be public anyway. So we heard that it would become apparent through an LPAT appeal process if we didn't negotiate. But, correct me if I'm wrong, please, if we're in the situation where we have to negotiate, does that not necessitate something happening at planning committee that would be outside of best planning practices? Therefore, we kind of know what's being discussed anyway, and if a negotiation is reached and then a project is approved, there needs to be some justification about good planning and why it can go forward. So isn't it discernible what is being talked about even if it is in a closed session?
It is at the end of the day, but remember, the end of the day is achieved through the decision of the tribunal adjudicator. So one of the parties you have to be fair to is let them make the decision. If we come to the hearing and we haven't got the partial or total deal, it's that person's job to weigh the evidence and review the law and make the decision.
Thank you. I'd like to add that if we actually get to a point where we're in closed session, there's a proposed settlement, the majority of council feels comfortable with it and want to report out in public, which is what I think was the initial concern about votes on settlements not happening in public session. So council decides we're going to go in open session, we're going to have a deliberation, and we're going to vote on this. What we've done in the past, because the details would not necessarily all be available right at that moment in terms of the details of the deal, but what we've done in the past few instances is we've also put a recommendation to council to report back with a full information report. Usually that happens the following council meeting because we take the time to pull together the report and we provide that. So at that point, a lot of the details are made available to the public. So it's not like there are months that typically would go by if we're putting that into the council recommendation to report out in public with an information report.
Okay, that's helpful. My next question is about decisions made in negotiation behind closed doors, and if they are not in keeping with best planning practices, does it not allow the project to be challenged anyway, even if council unanimously approved it? Couldn't a community group or another party challenge the decision? Therefore, the LPAT is invoked anyway.
In a without prejudice situation where you're only resolving a portion, that will always be the case. But it would be very rare and improper for the council not to consider that it's basing its decision based on good planning principles. There's good faith discussion and there's good faith bargaining. And
You and through you. So if we're in an appeal situation, so somebody has already been appealing, so there's an appellant, whether it's the applicant or someone from the public. So we're, in order to be able, so if the city comes to an agreement with the applicant through negotiation, in order to be able to continue this, someone would have to be a party to this particular appeal. So there's a period of time where people can actually sign up as a party to the appeal or participant. And that's where somebody could still challenge if they were a party or participant to the appeal.
Okay, that's all for now, thanks.
So ex officio members of council may now ask questions. Hutchinson.
Yes, I just want to be clear about a couple things to start off with. The question was asked, but I'm going to repeat it in a different way. So, are all settlements without prejudice? Or can there be settlements which do not involve the concept of without prejudice?
the concept of without prejudice is based on the idea that you haven't got a full resolution. We do have settlements often that completely conclude a matter. And in LPAT context, that would include, oh, sorry. Sorry. Oh, I wasn't low, sorry. The idea of without prejudice settlement resolutions is it's partial. But we have many cases where the whole matter is resolved. And in the context of a tribunal setting, part of that settlement can include the withdrawal of all appeals. So that in those situations, there wouldn't be any continuing ramification of the without prejudice context, because everybody should be satisfied and the settlement should be comprehensive. So in answer to your question, no, not all ones have that characteristic at their conclusion.
At their conclusion, okay. So I'll just follow this line, I guess, of thinking. So you said earlier you could get agreement, if you could get agreements on items that can be discussed in public, that was another way to avoid without prejudice, correct?
It does not.
Without prejudice, I'm talking about before we go to the LPAT.
That doesn't avoid without prejudice. What it clarifies is which items within the dispute, were the other party to agree to that, which items to the dispute wouldn't cause harm if there was disclosure. That whole discussion is still occurring within a without prejudice context.
But it could be to identify the items that we don't want to discuss with you.
It
If you're
can
talking-
also, we can also have items that are, you could have a settlement that identifies items we have not addressed, items which we have not addressed but you can talk about, that's fine, and then core business items. This is a bit theoretical in the sense that, you know, it's always going to depend on the individual hearing that you're moving through, but those opportunities are available as part of any negotiated settlement and then any discussion with council as to, is this an outcome that you wish to approve?
Okay, so just here, can indicate, but you did say we can indicate that we do not want your secret information and we'll proceed without it.
We certainly have the right, like a party,
Okay.
to not enter into information sharing and not enter into,
Well, you can share information, it's just a question of which parts can be public. You're asking them, tell us anything we can't, and then we will negotiate.
settlement agreement always have non-disclosure aspects to clarify the elements that would be harmful and the other elements of discussion that could be disclosed without perceived harm.
Okay, so the examples, can you give the items applicants may not want to be revealed in public? I mean, I know there's staff here have taken part in these negotiations, and it would be germane if we knew what examples do they not want to be made public. Going back to the question that was asked here, the minutes of settlement will eventually be made public. They're available to the public. So there's just a gap of time. The unfortunate thing, in the minutes of settlement are made public, the decision was already made like 2 months before, or a month, or whatever it is. So we're in a rather strange situation where we're saying we can't reveal the contents of the minutes of settlement, but we're going to reveal it later after we make a decision. I think you can see that's almost impossible to explain to the public.
If it was such that council in closed session felt that was the case, that would naturally lead to not pursuing the negotiation and not having the settlement. If it was more important to not be bound by information sharing, then the advice you would get in closed session is do not participate in information sharing if you don't want to carry the burden of the consequences.
Sure. But no one is going to say they don't want to share information. There's information that someone's willing to share, and then perhaps, maybe not at all, but perhaps there's information they don't want to share. So the question before council would be, and the applicant, is what do we want to share? And if we knew what those items could be, we could think concretely here or at council or wherever we're doing this, what are they? If we know what they, and there's nothing in here that tells me what is it that I can't talk about. That's one question, but more importantly, what could they be? And then you have to make a decision, do I think that's appropriate? Because some of this information is known to every applicant, and to council, and to staff. But for some reason, we're going to decide not to discuss it. So it seems to me that if you should be open, anybody that makes a deal with the city who's doing public business should be willing to have it made public. That's part of the deal. And it seems to me as a council, we can make it part of the deal. Don't, you know, you want to negotiate, we're willing to negotiate. We're willing to share information. But understand it will be made public before we vote on it.
It is open to any party, not just a government body, to negotiate on the basis of that full openness and set that out as a principle at the outset with anyone. It would be very, very unlikely anyone then would participate in it, not because it's wicked or wrong, but because it would be so unusual in the nature of dispute resolution. Dispute resolution, as I said earlier, is based on a body of law and a body of understanding and has certain expectations. To engage with that concept, so I'm confirming it's possible, but it would inevitably, I would suggest, lead to non-negotiation for that reason, because people will not want to proceed to have their interests exposed in a way that isn't within the procedural protections of a formal tribunal process.
Well, let me give you an example of what I'm thinking of. We have a gentleman, Brent Todrian, who's doing work for us right now on density by design and other aspects. When he was at Vancouver, I talked to him. They requested of developers that they submit their land economics analysis and say, why do you need this height or this width or whatever, massing, whatever it was. And they submitted it to the planning committee. The planning committee took the information and gave it to their analysts, okay? And that then the analyst would say, nah, or yes, yeah, that's fine, that makes sense, it's a bit gray, or no, it doesn't make, they don't have to be asking for that. They don't need that. So I don't know if you call that public, but you know what it is, and you can advise the planning committee and council accordingly. Now, if we know that, like we're inside the black box that now exists right now in all planning matters. We don't know what they're thinking or what we can guess what they're thinking, what their information is. We don't know whether it's actually, what they're telling us is actually accurate or not, because we haven't done the analysis. So what I'm trying to say is that much of this information, which I would think could be proprietary, can be made public in some form, if they want to build. It could be addition of application, because it's done other places.
Okay, you've made a couple of points there, but we're really just asking questions about this supplemental report and not trying to convince staff of further actions at this time. That would require a new motion to discuss. And there is a motion that we need to vote on, which is in item C.
Yeah, but my point of what my example is to give an example of what are the examples of items the applicant may not want to be revealed in public. It's a question.
Yeah, so I think for
can't
myself,
see what
I
it
can
is,
answer that
but
by
they
saying the economics might be one of those aspects that the proponent may not want disclosed, as an example.
Yeah, and I'm staff, what are those? So,
I mean, just by the nature of a negotiation, it's all of the moving parts in a negotiation or what they don't want disclosed during the negotiation.
Only if it's structured in a certain, and that's why I want to know what are the items.
So anyway, solicitor has an answer to that question. That's great. But from now on, for the purposes of procedure, we need to be asking direct questions about what's in the report. City Solicitor?
That will be a matter raised on a case-by-case basis. I can't give you a list of hypotheticals. We can recognize that there are categories of information that flow through in development agreements and other categories of permit acquisition. But for the purposes of tonight's report, which is a general process, I can assure you that those discussions, if they arise in a specific case, can be held. But I can't give you the list of what they would and wouldn't be, and then today sign off on anything. The point of today is presenting a flow of opportunity, a process by which the specific questions council would want to have reviewed is made available to council in closed session, and then as it moves into the open session.
Okay, so let's move on to the next item, and it's still related. This is item C. There's a recommendation on the next page there. That's the original recommendation that was at this committee, and that was deferred for asking for a supplemental report about the rationale. You'll see that wording at the bottom of the first page under C there. So in our August meeting, we asked for this supplemental report to provide further clarity regarding the rationale in the original report, which is 19-015. The original recommendation from 19-015 is on the next page. It needs to be amended now that there's a supplemental report, inserting the name of the supplemental report where it says this report, and that's bolded in the first clause, and then putting the original report at the end of the second clause, which is the 19-015. You'll see what's up on the screen does not exactly match what's in the package, and then we need that amendment now that we have the supplemental report. It's a consequence of having asked for the supplemental report. So we need a mover. Right. We can't move it yet because we have questions about item C, and now this is something that we've already gone through a question and answer session for this item at our last meeting in August. So these would be further questions about item C, and then, like I say, we will need to move it and amend it. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you. A procedural, if we vote for or against this now, does that mean it comes as a negative recommendation or positive to council, and then it's up to council to decide? So there's still the extra layer of that decision making?
Everything is a recommendation. So if it doesn't pass this committee, it goes to council in a negative form.
Yeah, and then further to that, you'll have to remind me of this too. If council votes yay or nay, either way, it paused for a year before it can be revisited.
Right, to your question, if council made a decision on this matter, it would be possible for the council to reconsider this matter. I'm sorry, was that your question?
It would be possible, yeah, within a year window.
It would be possible to reconsider once during the year.
Okay.
And the thing is, if recommendation passes at council, then nothing changes, basically. So all these reports are not put into bylaws. So anyway, any further questions about item C? Remember, this has already been discussed at our last meeting. Councillor McLaren.
If we're not quite happy with this and if we're not happy with this and we want some more changes, what did we supposed to do? Are we voted down or deferred with more recommendations or what?
Yeah, so the same thing that happened last meeting with 19-015 can theoretically happen as many times as the committee wishes. So the last time, that's what we did. We deferred for additional report to explain the rationale. That's what this report did. If you're still not satisfied with the additional information, you can ask for further additional information, but I wouldn't ask for a motion to that effect unless this recommendation fails. Unless it's a deferral. If you're asking, if you're deferring it again, you would move deferral. You can't do any of that until it's procedurally on the floor. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council or committee members are considering a deferral, that they also provide direction as to what they would like to see come back to the committee. Because I think if it's a request just for additional clarification, what we will attempt to do is provide more clarity, but I'm not sure that that's really the concern of committee members. So I think it would be best if there was a clearer direction of what you would like to see come back.
Because all members have the option of voting against the recommendation, and if that's what council upholds, that's what happens. So it's like you would the reason for asking for more information would be to eventually have a recommendation that you would want to pass. So you'd need to put that in your rationale for a deferral.
So I'm not looking for more information. I'm looking for a slight change in procedure, of recommended procedure.
Amendments to the recommendation are in order once it's on the floor. That would require 3 votes to pass in any scenario. So if you're thinking of an amendment, go ahead and start writing it down, and we will discuss it when the time comes. While you're thinking about that, we'll go to members of the public about questions about items B or C.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon, Williamsville resident. I'm going to start off by commending staff and the committee members for what's been an excellent work package and question session so far. I think the explanations from the city solicitor have been outstanding. I've learned a lot from that. And I want to commend him especially on the flowchart example that he's presented. Now, I have a suggestion with respect to that. It's a bit complicated. This is a general case that's been presented, so that's useful. And I'm speaking as a scientist here, and you're using a scientific technique, right? So that's good. What I'm wondering is if you might be able to come up with a specific example from past City of Kingston experience where the details from the other parties would be allowed to be made public as a way of further, I guess, clarifying what's going on. So, or if there are other cases in other cities that, like if you read a law textbook, for example, you have cases there that are explained in full or that illustrate certain points. So that's just a suggestion. It is quite a bit of work, but the material is difficult. It's intricate, complicated. I think we all agree on that. We are making progress on this. It's a challenging file, right? So we're persevering with it. So my next question has to do with whether there's been some detailed work done on various comparator Ontario cities on their sets of procedures with respect to this. I think we're seeing some of that in the examples that are quoted in the reports. So that's very good. I do want to make one observation that's a bit critical. On page 19, there is a British Columbia case quoted in the notes. And what I'm wondering is, could a specific Ontario case be located and found instead and inserted in there, because likely British Columbia municipal law may vary or differ from Ontario municipal law in some respects. I'm not an expert on that, I don't know. But I think all the other examples are Ontario-based. So just as a way of being consistent on that. And I note that during some of the discussion that we had on item B, one of the points was made referring to a Vancouver example, which may also have differing law procedures in place than in Ontario. So, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Staff will respond to all members of the public after all members of the public have had a chance to speak. Does anyone else wish to speak? No? Seeing none, staff has a chance to respond to the questions from the member of the public.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Dixon. I was the person who selected the BC ruling, quote, on page 19 of the August report that you refer to. I chose it in the sense that it is a general principle that I would apply within any Canadian municipal situation. It's a principle of such high level that I think it spoke to this, and if I was to have found an Ontario case making that position, it simply probably didn't state it as well. So, as you say, most of the citations in the documents that I provided are local to Ontario, and that was my intention when I chose one from BC.
Was there another question that you were about to answer, or is that it? Okay.
Positive comments that Mr. Dixon made.
All right, thank you. So what we need now is a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, the original recommendation that was deferred, which is at the top of page 3. So I need a member of the committee to move this. And then if there is going to be a deferral or an amendment, I would ask for a recess to make sure that we've got the wording right. But first it needs to be moved and seconded to get it on the floor. Actually, Councillor, did you have a question?
I did, and if I could ask it before.
Yeah.
I feel hijacked.
Yeah, so you're visiting councillor, you're permitted to ask questions.
Thank you.
But it's an information report, so it's the supplemental report that we were discussing.
Yeah,
so,
it's on key procedural elements that are described here. This is probably a question for the solicitor. Quite often, particularly in planning, we can have an in-camera meeting and it can be months and sometimes years before it comes to council. The difficulty, and this happened in one specific incident that I won't repeat because it was in camera, but there was a bit of information that was in the in-camera report that later became public knowledge through the media, newspaper and television, reporting a fact. And when I asked about that, it was probably with the previous city solicitor, might have been with the clerk, I was told, no, anything in a report that's in camera, nobody that was part of that in-camera meeting can speak to it at all, even though it's now become public knowledge. And that strikes me as counterproductive. I mean, obviously, the councillor shouldn't say, and at a meeting 3 years ago, this is what I heard, but they should be able to reference a newspaper article or a media report.
The question is hypothetical, and it becomes very challenging to answer it correctly in such a way that might satisfy you, but suffice it to say that the prohibition, and this is set out on page 22 of the August 8th, it's the consideration of why you wouldn't disclose things is we don't want to reveal the substance of deliberations of a meeting in council held in closed session. So the challenge would become if you in any way characterize the information that had become otherwise public in a new way. And unfortunately, I know this as a defense lawyer, I would say, you may not know what you just said, you may not know how that connects to other information, But when you do put that information together, it looks like you disclosed the deliberations of a closed session meeting, and it becomes very difficult to backtrack from that point. So at that moment, when you're facing that situation, it's one where you have to be very careful to be discreet because of the nature of the two sources, one being in confidence and one obviously being in public.
So if I were to word it as reported in the Whig Standard, that, and I then state a fact.
You may be able to, but I would always advise be very careful to act with discretion when you're handling any statement that relates to something in closed session.
Then I strongly suggest council are given copies of reports, because sometimes the topic comes up. In the case of one planning file, it was 5 years later that it came to council. So.
Thank you. Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation on top of page 3 so that we can deal with it. Moved by Councillor Spell, seconded by, am I allowed to second it? Yes. I will second it. Okay, so that the Administrative Policies Committee recommend to Council that A, Council adopt the process for deliberating and voting upon matters received in closed session in accordance with the processes set out in this report, and B, Council continue to rely on the existing processes for disclosure of records related to the closed session provided for the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So that is from the August meeting. It was what was deferred. This supplemental report has been submitted in the interim. We, because of the supplemental report, need to amend the recommendation to include the name of the supplemental report, which is 20-006. So that amendment needs to happen procedurally anyway. Any other amendments and deferrals will be in order once you have the floor. But I would like to deal with this one first because it's a procedural amendment, so I need a mover for the procedural amendment. It's to change the recommendation, to update it to include the second report as up on the screen. Okay, so moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Any debate? Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. So now it's as amended as you see there, is what's on the floor. Who would wish to speak to the recommendation? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. On with staff and with my colleagues, I'd like to move deferral as such, that the item be deferred back to staff to allow for review of the chart with concerns with openness of process, fairness to public participation and other democratic principles, and arguments in favor of public transparency outweighing principles without prejudice.
So you've written that down? Okay, if you could just give it to the clerk, I will call a 2-minute recess while the clerk types it up, and then we will deal with the deferral according to procedure. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm calling the meeting back to order. We are under a little bit of time pressure. There's a deferral on, a deferral's been proposed, it's been typed up, it's on the screen. I'm going to read it out, and then we can debate it, but only according to the procedural rules of debate of deferrals. So, moved by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that further deliberation regarding closed meetings, the key, should that be plural, closed meetings? Or is it singular? Closed meetings. No, it is a plural. Closed meetings, key procedural elements, report AP-20-006 and report AP-19-015 be deferred back to staff in order to allow for review of the details, including the chart and concerns with respect to openness of process, fairness to public participation and other democratic principles, and arguments in favor of public transparency outweighing principles of without prejudice settlements. The deferral's in order. Councillor McCarry, you can go first, speaking to time and place and rationale.
So it says whenever we can meet and discuss these issues, place. Hopefully it'll come back here. And the rationale is because there are still some things that don't seem to strike me as the proper balance between openness and secrecy that are needed. And I think that we can achieve a better balance. Thank you.
Okay, so let the record show, can you put that back up on the screen? So the deferral does not specify a time, so the time is unspecified. It's understood that it would come back to this committee. Any other discussion on time and place or rationale? Okay, yes, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you. Through you. Concerning time, though clear when exactly it will come back, I think it's important now because we have a number of other policies that could help clarify some of these things, density by design, land use economics, that will emerge shortly, likely before this coming back. And I think that would give greater context for some of the concerns we heard tonight.
So procedurally, what's debatable is whether to leave it as an unspecified time or whether to add specifics about what we're waiting for that would prevent it from coming back before that happens. We heard at our last meeting that the list that is given in a deferral is never a complete list. It's always an example list. So anything relevant to the report that staff turns up can be included in the report, but if you want to make sure it doesn't come back too early, you would have to specify what other reports need to be in first in the deferral. So, yeah, you have the floor.
Yeah, could I ask staff then, CAO Hurdle perhaps, is there a timeline when, if we were to defer, this would be best to come back, given potential other landmark policies?
Thank you, and through Mr. Chair. So if we're thinking, and I understand the context of density by design and some of the land economics work that will take place, density by design will probably take another, I'm going to say, solid 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, just based on all the feedback we're getting from the public. So if we're going to take that into that context, then this would be deferred most likely into later in 2020.
So your comment time, again, procedurally need to be whether you think it best to leave it unspecified or whether we should specify a time.
Yeah, I personally think it's best to leave it unspecified then, and my examples were only examples. The spirit of them shows that there are additional considerations in the framework of what's outlined in the deferral that I think will be prescient to making a decision, and staff are aware of that, and hopefully will adopt some of that thinking in the discussions that will come if this deferral passes.
Any other comments to time, place, or rationale? Councillor Spelt?
Just a point of clarification. I would think that you would need to have a defined time in this deferral. And so I find it troubling to just leave it ambiguous. And from your experience, Mr. Chair, is this unprecedented? Like, have you seen this before?
I hadn't specified time before, but maybe the clerk could a deferral without a specific time and what that means procedurally. Bolognon?
Through Mr. Chair, you are correct. We don't necessarily need to have a time with respect to that. My feeling is that we're going to have to really take a look at this motion in context of what the councillors or movers and seconders are really looking at. So I would encourage you just to leave it blank at this point and allow us to work proactively to get the correct information following our meetings. And we're more than prepared to provide an update to committee on the status of where we are at any point in time. So I would encourage you to leave it blank at this time.
So my ruling, Councillor Chappelle, would be that it's in order to have it unspecified. Also, in the coming year, the committee is, this is the composition of the committee, and any member of the committee can make a motion to ask for a report on this matter, a status update on this matter, which would make it happen at the next meeting. So that can happen at any time. Okay. In general, I do agree that it's always best, if we know the time, to put it in the motion. Any other comments? Okay, I'll call the question on the deferral. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes 3-1. The recommendation is deferred. We'll move on to the next item. So for the next 3 items, which are all to do with municipal discounts, it's items E, F, and G. There is actually a handout. It will be on screen digitally, but there are handouts available as well. I got one that just gives some of this supplemental information. Yep. This one? So the first thing on the agenda is the information report, which is a supplemental report as a result of the discussion at council. So this is an item that was deferred to this committee by council, which is why it's here. And there's a motion from the mayor that was made at council that was deferred here as well. But the first item is the supplementary information report. So we'll let staff speak to that item. So that's the report on pages 49 to 55, AP 20-001. Go ahead, Ms. Hitchin.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The report in front of you, 20-001, basically provides you with a little more information about the impact of the mayor's recommendation. And just to refresh everyone's memory, the motion that the mayor put forward was to phase out age-based discounts over time. So those currently in receipt of age-based discounts would continue to receive them. And to raise the income-based limit from the current LICO up to the LIM. So those are the 2 parts of the mayor's recommendation. As simply as I can state it. Referring to Exhibit A in the report, I provided you with the financial impact of this motion, as well as the other options that are still on the table from our previous discussions. So the mayor's motion is a combination, if you're looking at Exhibit A, of number 4 in the age-based discounts option, the phase-out, and number 6, which is raising the income threshold to LIM AT. So you can see it in comparison to the other options that are still on the table. I'm happy to answer any questions.
My first question, is there any visual on digital that we could have on the screen for members of the public that want to follow along? Do we? We don't? We just have the other options. Oh, okay. Right. Okay, so the first up would be questions about that report, 20-001.
Point of, for the benefit of the public, it's page 55.
Okay, so page 55 of the package has the report 18-004, right? Is that what you're talking about? There's 59.
Sorry, that's exhibit I'm referencing on page 55.
55 of Exhibit A. Hang on, there's double numbering. Is it this chart here? Yeah. Okay, so there, on page 55, it says Exhibit A at the top. There is a chart that has the various numbers and combinations of no matter what we do, the original motion had to do with two types of discounts. One is age-based discounts and one is means-based or income-based discounts. And they're all listed on page 55, 1 through 7, and then the combinations are listed as well. Some of those combinations came to us in the original motion at council, but theoretically, all of the combinations are possible based on the permutations, other than procedurally, the two combinations that were voted down at council, which were the original options C and E, and that's why you don't see them in the combinations list. It's all very complicated, but it'll become clear as we discuss it. Any questions about this newest information? Councillor Spell.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The last time I looked at this proposal, I was very critical on the way the math was performed, and I asked for clarification on the math of exactly how many seniors utilize the services based. I know we have a population of some perceived 40-some thousand seniors, but I didn't get the exact numbers. So I find that the math is very loose, and I actually find it offensive that I don't have that information yet to know exactly how many people have used these discounts, because we're making decision based on theoretical numbers, and I have a stress.
Your comment is noted. However, at this point, you really only have the opportunity to ask further questions. So you could ask staff about those numbers if you like.
Can I expect to see those numbers this evening?
Titchin.
Certainly, I can provide some level of detail. I'm not sure I can do it this evening, but in terms of the current utilization for which we did the projections, the math behind these numbers, we can certainly provide some of that. The challenge is, in some instances, there, as noted in the previous report, we don't have exact numbers because in some circumstances we don't keep track. For example, we know how many people buy bus passes based on age, so we know how many of those passes are given out, but how often they're utilized is a more challenging answer. So I can certainly give you the math behind these numbers. I'm not sure I can give it to you in a form that's useful this evening, but I can certainly do it tomorrow. That's certainly available.
Hearing that, I'm there to vote this evening, and I think I might have to leave.
Well, the logical thing, if you don't have enough information, would be to move deferral to receive that information, but we're not there yet because we're still on questions. Any other questions about this report? Councillor Kiley.
Keep questioning the figures for a moment, if I could. A high-level question, which I know it's stated in the report, but I think it's important to put on record for the benefit of the councillor and other members here. All of the numbers are based on assumptions. So even if we get the best data from the current years or years past, it could change next year if X, Y, and Z happen. So going forward, even if the numbers are shored up a bit for the next week or two or however long it would take to happen, we don't know what's going to happen next year. Fair?
Through Chair, that's correct. The assumptions are noted in the report and the basis for those projections. So we use the same assumptions for all of the projections, so they're comparable. But in terms of what the poverty level will be 10 years from now, we don't know. Nor do we know the pattern of utilization for seniors 10 years from now compared to 2018. And this was really based on 2018 utilization and then taking that forward.
Right, fair. And so another thing we won't know rate of inflation. So the second last column, percentage of change per 2018, that's the additional cost, but it's not necessarily based on 2018 dollars, is it? Because we don't know how to project that far in the future.
We didn't add in inflationary calculations in here. We did, for example, raise the cost of our fees over time and factored that in, as you can see in the list of assumptions. But the percentage of the population was based on the Watson population projections. And again, those are as accurate as they can be when you're dealing with projections.
Yeah, and I think that's a very reasonable assumptions, and they're very articulated. I actually think that if we were to take more time to look at the numbers, they would look better and they would look more fiscally responsible. So I'd encourage my colleague not to leave the room, because I think that a deeper dive will actually make this look even better.
Okay, so as chair, I'd just like to remind the committee, the CAO did say at the beginning of the meeting that none of the items are time sensitive, including this one. So it is deferrable. It's not under time pressure. It wouldn't be able to be applied for the 2020 fiscal year in January if we don't decide today, but that's a consideration, but that doesn't prevent it from being deferred. The context from the discussion at council, just remind you, if you don't remember what happened at council, we had options A through G, and none of them passed. 2 of them failed, and then it was deferred. So that is essentially what happened at council. Was no consensus was found, and that's why it was deferred to us, so that we could try to find consensus. So at the very least, we have to try to find consensus. If we can't find consensus here, we won't have it at council either. If we do find consensus here, we still might not have it at council. But it's important that we at least know what is under discussion and what are the options. So we have 4 different age-based discount options, and right. Theoretically, there's 7 different moving parts, and the mayor's motion was an attempt to fast track us to a conclusion that gave one outcome. And that is procedurally the next thing we have to deal with. So are there any more questions about the information report? Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Just very, I did a speed reading of this, I have to fess up, because this isn't one of my usual committees. But did I read somewhere that there's that this policy and practice will be reviewed in 2 years' time?
With reference to the deferred motion, there was a clause in there that would be reviewed in 2 years. There's also the possibility of reviewing it in a year, depending on the wishes of this committee. It could be brought back sooner than 2 years if it's the committee's choice.
And I'm not going to speak to any potential deferral, because that wouldn't be fair, but I do think that we have a staff that will flag for us if some of their assumptions that were drawn on this. We'll get a report back. I believe it says here in 2 years. Also, in 3 years, we'll have a new council. So that can be reviewed at that time. I know granting a benefit and then trying to take it away a couple years later is always a challenge, a political challenge.
We just had questions about the supplemental report, though.
Thank you.
So everyone likes to get ahead of themselves, but we got to deal with things in order procedurally. So we'll go to members of the public for questions or comments about the supplemental report. Oh, Councillor Hutchison, if you do not ask a question, I will cut you off.
I'm just asking questions before. So anyway, my first question is a procedural one. Does the committee have to defeat option C before proceeding with another alternative?
Through there, currently, okay, we're considering the supplemental report. The next item on the agenda is a deferred motion, which the mayor presented at council, which is on the screen. In regards to option C, there was a recommendation at council that option C is defeated, as well as there was another vote at council which defeated option E. So in the event that the mayor's motion is defeated, the other options minus option C and E would be up for debate.
Right, and I followed that because it seems to me that's what I was
I'll
assuming.
again, when we get there, but we can't constantly be looking into the future and not dealing with the item that's in front of us. The item that's in front of us is questions about the supplemental report. If you don't have any, we'll move to the next item and you'll see what it is.
Okay, so I'm looking at report AP 20-001. Are we dealing with that at the moment? The answer is yes, isn't it?
20-001.
That's the first question.
Yes, 20-001
Okay.
is what's under,
Okay,
is
so.
being questioned.
So my confusion is, let's see what it says here, that option C is in that report, and it's also, the alternate option is also in the report, and that's what I'm trying to understand what's happening here.
So, and perhaps Ms. Hitchin can speak further to her report, but option C was voted on at council.
And it was defeated.
And it was defeated. So there very well may be the inclusion of data regarding option C just to provide a holistic picture. However, option C and option E would not be on the table tonight unless the committee asks council to
Right.
reconsider.
I get it, okay. So C and E are off, I get
Yes.
that. It was just a question of the mayor's option. Okay, that's what I was really trying to get at. And we have to vote on that.
So the
Okay.
next
not me,
point, the next
the committee.
vote that this committee will have is on the mayor's motion.
Okay, and we'll bring that up if they wish, the alternate option, once you've dealt with C.
Again, we're getting ourselves, we gotta deal with things in order. Questions about the report? Councillor Spell.
On the numbers, these are all bagels, and so we're looking and voting on a model that's based on hypothetical usage of hypothetical seniors that may be hypothetically taking the bus, and giving that hypothetical savings, but our real numbers and hypothetical savings to augment a program that will be very difficult to address or even moderate in the future. We have a great deal of uncertainty with the provincial government, and I think it's very dangerous to start increasing funds, have a line of sight of where the province is going.
Yeah, that's great, and I understand your point, and I take it, but the
So
question
the
about.
question, I don't have the numbers, when I raised this with such great concern at the last meeting when this was discussed.
Your options, as I said before, are if not enough information was included in report 20-001, is to defer the recommendation when we come to an actionable item so that that information can be included. That's your option. Your concerns are noted, but they will be in play no matter what happens, and when you have the floor, you can go into it. Okay, any other questions? Members of the public? On report 20-001.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to commend staff's efforts on this. It's difficult, intricate, complicated. So I think we're making progress. I think people are thinking about it in detail, interacting with the community. So all of that's really good. I've got maybe three specific points. One of them might address some of the aspects of what Councillor Chappelle was talking about. And this is with respect to the survey. Okay, so the fact that the survey was done is good. We have a data set there that's created from that. But is there anything that's preventing any one person from voting more than once with the methodology, right? You get a relatively low number of people who took part in it. So just as a math person, I'm asking that question. it's difficult to maybe design a system, or it's more complicated to do that. Like you need a sort of a personalized key-in number to prevent that. But so there is some validity, I think, with the information. My second point has to do, just with an observation for tonight's meeting. We have 4 people of the 6 on the committee in place, and it's already been talked about a number of times. So if we don't really get through this, what I'm going to respectfully propose is that a special meeting of this committee be called to deal with it at a time when all members can make it. Everybody has their schedules, busy lives, and so forth. I'm not blaming anybody for not being here, but it is important, and the effort that's gone into it shows that. Now, my third point is a more specific suggestion. I made this before, and it's an engineering-related item with respect to Kingston Transit passes. And I know this is done elsewhere. With respect to the ages of the people who are using Kingston Transit, if you buy a pass, right? Now, people who use passes are only a small percentage of the users overall, right? But the passes could be engineered so that they can be read by a scanner with additional information being imparted. For example, if it's a senior or a high school student or so forth, that information could be gathered at the fare box if they're paying through pass, right? They could be paying through cash as well, or so that's a suggestion. I made it before, and it would provide a more accurate reading of the usage patterns. Not easy to obtain, but there are other cities that do it. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak? Please come forward to a microphone. This is the Supplemental Information on Municipal Discounts, Report 20-001. Go ahead.
Is on? Yes. So ideally, given the city's declared climate crisis, public transit would be free. But given the Ontario government's relentless downloading on municipalities, that's not a realistic option. Professor Margaret Little, who holds the Sir Edward Peacock Chair in Gender and Politics at Queen's University, says she has seen how free bus services for youth helps increase transit usage while leveling the playing field so low-income youth can go to the Y or participate in extracurricular activities after school because they don't have to pay for transportation. When Professor Little asked single mothers and on welfare what they did on an average day, she was astounded by all the time they spent just trying to get from one place to another for basic services. Here's what she told me, quote, "The welfare rate is not enough to live on, so they spend a lot of time walking to the laundromat and back, walking to their part-time job, their volunteer work, walking to the medical clinic, walking to the grocery store and back, walking to the food bank and back." By the way, the food bank is not on a bus line, she tells me, which is an absolute crime, she says, showing how we do not care at all about low-income people. Many low-income people are employed, possibly working several jobs, all at minimum wage. They need affordable public transit to get to and from work. Reducing, or better yet, eliminating transit fares for low-income people would reduce their stress and time constraints so they could shop for food and do laundry more easily, and so they could participate in the free public events in the city. It would have a huge impact on their ability to be active members of our community. It would also allow them to take part more during the winter when walking can be treacherous and they become more shut in. No doubt there are low-income seniors in our community, and they should be accorded the appropriate discount in transit fares, but many seniors, myself included, have the luxury of a defined benefit pension combined with old age security and the Canada pension. People like us don't actually need the transit discount and should not siphon the available funds away from those who really do. As Mayor Patterson pointed out, the issue here is good policy versus good politics. I'd like to remind councillors that good policy inspires trust and respect, while so-called good politics breeds cynicism and contempt.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? Staff has an opportunity to respond to any questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just to Mr. Dixon's comments. The survey that was done as part of the last report, not as part of this report, was done through our Get Involved page on our website, which does require a login, so there's some protection in terms of duplication in that process. It's not foolproof, but that is what was used for that research component. And I think that was the only question that needed answering.
Thank you. So that wraps up this item on the supplemental information report. So we move to F, which is a deferred motion from September 3rd, 2019, council meeting regarding discounted fees for municipal programs and services. So I'll read the note because it gives the context. So on September 3rd, 2019, the following motion was deferred to be considered by the Administrative Policies Committee, deferred by council, right? In conjunction with the receipt of a supplemental information report, which is the one we just discussed, providing analysis of the option outlined below in the context of the previous report, number AP-19-016. So procedurally, just to recap, at council, there was options A to G. 2 were proposed, C and E. They both were voted down by council. At that point, the mayor made this motion, which was actually, is it one of the ones? It's similar to one of the options, but it's a standalone motion. But it would replace the recommendation, any of the options that were in the original report, if passed. It was deferred to us to try to find a consensus here at committee once we look into the details with the help of this supplemental report. So now we need to deal with the deferred motion, and it is in the form of recommendation to council, right? So do we recommend that council adopt this motion or not? And if we say yes, then item G becomes moot. But if we say no to this deferred motion, we then are obligated to find an alternative to recommend to council, which would be one of the original options that wasn't already voted down, or any combination of the two types of discounts that wasn't described in the original combinations, but which we could theoretically come to if that's the only way to find consensus. That's the order of things. Deal with the mayor's motion, and if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, we really dig down and we try to find consensus in some other way. So who would like to speak to the deferred motion? Councillor Spell.
I just have a question. Given I've complained about the way this was presented the last time and how we're combining as age-based discount with increasing social assistance for those that are less fortunate. Both of them are applaud. You know, the age-based discount has been around since World War II. After the war, this came out, the age-based discount came out to about 7 years ago or so. It's 2007. So my question is it possible to split these so that we actually have a firm vote with the council on elimination or decreasing age-based discounts, and then where people stand on the other? Or why do they have to be intrinsically intertwined?
That's repeat what I said. Procedurally, the deferred motion is what was deferred, and if passed, it would make all the other options moot because it is addressing both types of discounts. So procedurally, that's the order. To the question of whether we can do them separately, we would do that on item G if item F fails. That's the procedural answer, right? So we need to ask questions about item F, which is the mayor's motion. So that's all that's in order right now, and then we go to members of the public, and then we vote on it and debate it. We debate it, and then we vote on it. And what you're suggesting wouldn't happen unless item F was not failed here at the committee, because we do have to recommend to council some kind of positive option. So questions only on item F. Questions on the mayor's motion? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you. To be sure, at is about $20,000 per individual, if I remember the chart from the last report right, approximately. Because I remember Lim 15 being about 25,000 and the current LICO being about 17,000. So Lim at was kind of in the middle.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's about, and I'm doing this from memory without pulling the report out, it's about, for a single person, it's about 22,000.
22.
All of the rates for Lim, LICO, and Lim 15 go up by size of family, not in the same increments, but for a single person, it's about 22,000. It's about 5,000 more roughly than LICO.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this motion, the deferred motion in front of us? Okay, so go to members of the public. Questions or comments on the deferred motion? Seeing none. Okay, so we need to move. Oh, we do have one. Sorry about that. You just have to come to a microphone, identify yourself, and you have 5 minutes to speak. You can ask questions or make comments. Ms. Birmingham, you can use this microphone, actually.
We already got. Oh,
You're here.
Thanks.
My name is Marilyn Birmingham, and I live at 93 Hillcrest Avenue. I just want to make a comment on the seniors discount. I have to say I do like this proposal. I worked at the Senior Citizens Council for, 30 years. It's now called the Seniors Center. And so I had a lot of interaction with seniors. And I want to say, the seniors that are seniors now, I think are very hesitant to ask for discounts. They'll just sort of suck it up, so to speak. I used to do, as part of my thing, do income tax for the seniors, and even when they were eligible for gains, they didn't apply for them because it's just, it's part of the culture of that and this age group, I think. That's why I like the mayor's motion, because people will sort of get used to the idea that seniors discounts. I have to say, when I was, before I was a senior, I was really looking forward to all the discounts, and there aren't that many out there anymore. But I think that once this group is gone, I think it would be fair to, people will be expecting to pay, full fees for things, and rather than, I guess my main point is, I think people that are seniors now are very hesitant to ask for help, as a general statement in my fairly large experience working with seniors.
Thank you. Any other public wish to speak? If you have to turn the button on the bottom and then make sure it's on. Is it working? And the clerk will activate their mic. It's not working. It's not working. Hang on. Sorry about that. The microphone did the same thing to me at council the other night, actually.
As usual, my partner and I will disagree. What I want to say is that in terms of bus passes, the assumption that, what seniors are using buses? It's not clear, I don't think, in the data, which seniors are, how people select themselves out. And in fact, most seniors who use, a lot of seniors use buses, have reaching the point in their lives where they're becoming income stressed. I mean, so things that you may not be considering is the extent to which we have handicaps, or I'm supposed to say handicaps, disabilities and challenges that cost money to resolve and deal with. Just to give you one example, medical bills that are not covered, fully covered, for example. Also, seniors live on fixed incomes mostly, and their situation gets more vulnerable. Other costs go up, and their income is not going up either. So those who are riding the buses really are the people who are more likely going to be in need. And that may or may not be true of other services. I am not able to say. So I worry that you're going to hurt the people who need them the most if you take away senior discounts. And as my partner indicated, people hesitate at our age to make visible their need, their vulnerabilities. And I don't think that's going to change. You know, when we go to symphony orchestra, we've been going for years, they always are somehow an older population, but somehow they keep getting replaced. So anyway, thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Grubin. Any other members of the public? You could, Ms. Hurdle, if you could just turn off that microphone. Thank you. Okay, so we need a mover and the seconder for the deferred motion to get it on the floor. We can't do anything until it happens, so moved by Councillor Kiley. Just because you move something doesn't mean you have to support it. I need a seconder. All right, I will second. So, this is a deferred motion originally from Mayor Pattison and Councillor Hill that Council approve the phase out of age-based discounts beginning on January 1st, 2021. It is on the screen. All right, maybe I won't read the whole thing. We've seen it before. But remember that, so this addresses both kinds of discounts. And that is the task before us today, to recommend something to council that addresses both kinds of discounts. So if you were looking on the chart from that Councillor Kiley mentioned on page 55, it's option 4 from 1, 2, 3, 4 of the age-based options, and option 6 from the 5, 6, 7 income-based options. So it's the 4-6 combo. And there's detail in the supplemental report that addresses it. So it's moved and seconded. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you. Through you, I'll speak against it because I appreciate the mayor is trying to find the best of both worlds, but I think it actually went the opposite direction and found maybe not the worst, but it will draw the ire of those who want to keep seniors discounts because it is a phase out, and that will be what people hold on to when they hear about this. So it won't satiate that group. And then, frankly, it won't help those who need help the most by being limb at as opposed to limb 15. So I think it's kind of this muddy middle ground that isn't going to be great. And it is an example, unfortunately, as he said himself, so I'm just quoting what was mentioned at council, of politics moving over good policy. I don't think this is good policy at all, and that's the mandate of our committee here, is to put our mind to how we can meet the needs of people eligible for these programs most effectively, and I don't think that this option represents it for a number of reasons, but that's high level enough for now. So let's not support it and find a better option of the many options that we do have available, even if we say no to this.
Thank you. Councillor Chappelle.
I stand only because I'm tired of sitting. I'm actually going to support this motion. And the reason being is it allows me time to go back to the citizens who are really upset, the senior citizens that were even touching this issue of age-based discounts. But at least it gives me some phase-in time to consolidate them and help them understand the process and the fact that the ones that are currently receiving a discount will continue to do so for a period of time. I'm also speaking in favor because I think jumping two levels of social assistance is way too much when we're going to have a review of this in 2 years. And I think it's an incremental stage to do the LIM rather than the LIM 15. We are not York Region. We do not have 1 million people plus living in the area to subsidize this with their tax base. And therefore, I think this is probably the only good compromise we have as a motion if we want to deal with this issue tonight. Thank you. I'll be supporting it.
So there are 2 more members of the committee that can speak. Councillor McLaren, do you want to go next? You have nothing to say? Okay, so any visiting members of council can speak to the motion, but of course you don't get a vote. Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
I appreciate the intention, as I did at council, because it's a hybrid. It recognizes, even with a kind of flawed phase-in, a seniors discount while facilitating a discount. As I mentioned both times this came to council, there are some realities, and Ms. Birmingham spoke to it as her partner, who I don't think we're in total disagreement on this. They both spoke to the fact that seniors often are reluctant to ever share the information that they're in poverty. And that is troubling on a lot of fronts. And like my mother, who's now deceased, would have qualified for a senior's discount, would have qualified if she had gone requesting an assessment of her income. But like a lot of survivors of the Second World War and the Depression, I could never see her ever darkening the door of and that's unfortunate. I mean, we should be able to reach out and help people who are truly in need. I think this motion recognizes a motion that is a hybrid, which this is, and I understand G would be as well, the original G one. So, and I personally, I am well pensioned, and I turned 65, I won't say how many years ago, but I did turn 65. I still have a bus pass that is not a senior's discounted bus pass because, frankly, either I'm too lazy to go in and change it or I don't need to change it. And I think that there are people, seniors with bus passes right now, that likely would continue to not worry about those $20 a year additional. So, so I think the intent of this is good. I also think defeating this and having an option that delivers more to those that legitimately are below the poverty line would be a good thing for this committee to do as well.
Councillor Hutchison?
Thank you. I think that reasoning is fine. We have other hybrids, so there are better hybrids available in this chart, and hopefully someone will bring it up. And staff have already given us a hybrid they think will work, and they can make it cost effective, right? So I encourage the committee to follow that line of reasoning. The other thing I want to point out about, the word about costs and that, I just want to make this point, is that I think that we cannot, per Councillor Chappelle, we cannot talk about the real costs of supplying these discounts because we don't gather the information. That's the information. That's the point that staff are making. But the second thing is the concept of lost revenue is a problem in itself. It's how it's conceived, how it's measured, what its effects are. Because if you have a bus that's not full, which is most of the time, okay, and somebody serves, and somebody on a discounted rate wants to be on it, it's costing us nothing to transport them. It's not costing us any more if they're on there, because it's, 3/4 empty, half empty, 35% empty, right? There's room for them. The same goes for the recreational program. I think they're rarely sold out, rarely used to completion. The same goes for the concert tickets. I just talked to a counselor the other day. She turned up on the wrong night for the Nutcracker, and they still got in because there was empty seats. So did it cost us one way or the other? Heck no. So the concept is nebulous. The totals are nebulous. We shouldn't make decisions based on nebulous numbers. So, and because it's simply not the real cost to us. If the uses are not full, then the total cost doesn't come back to us because we allow somebody on the bus or whatever it is. So, and I think that opens it up for us to consider one of the other hybrids. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councilor McLeod, speak. I wish to say something, so
I'll take it as you.
Thank you. I might stand up too. First of all, I do agree with both Councillor Spell and Councillor Hutchison when they question the validity of the numbers, especially the lost revenue numbers and the estimates 10 or 15 years into the future. Neither my father would just shake his head at us trying to use any of those numbers to form our decision. So what I did with those numbers is I just ranked them in order of what I knew to be able to separate the options, what I knew about the various options. So it is, regardless of what you think about the lost revenue and the estimates, it's clear that LIM 15 is a discount, is a deeper discount than LIM AT, which in itself is deeper than LICO, which is where we are now. So that we can agree on. There's 3 levels of discounts that are income-based, and one of them is the deepest discount, and one of them is the shallowest discount, and that's where it is today. Same thing with the age-based. We don't know exactly what it's costing us, but we know that phasing out the age-based discounts will remove those discounts from those users, and therefore any whatever the lost revenue is, it then disappears with the phase out. And how do I use that to form my decision? I say there's no point in doing a means-based discount half-heartedly. Either we want to help those in need or we don't. So the question about whether they're going to apply or not is beyond our control. But what we can do is offer the best discount. And instead of thinking of it as how much is this going to cost us, we should be thinking of how much is this going to promote our service. We want people to use the service. We want people to take the bus. Yes, it's true that Ottawa has people lining up for half an hour to get the next bus. We may get there in Kingston as well. That's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to have a transit system that's that popular, and we can deal with that when it happens. We're not talking about making transit free for all users, but some places have already done that. So even if we go with the LIM 15, we're not going as far as some municipalities have already gone, at least when it comes to transit. So what does that mean for the mayor's motion? It means I agree with Councillor Kiley. It's a hybrid, and I don't see the upside on either side, and I wouldn't choose either of those options out of the menu. So therefore, I will be voting against the mayor's option, and hopefully we can come to a consensus on the other options. Thank you.
I yield to you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish? So we will vote on the deferred motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? What just happened? No, but he never does. John's not here. Yeah. It's up to you to report it. Even if you did, Councillor Chappelle, I take it you're getting ready to leave and end the meeting? Okay. There was a Rick Downs moment there for a moment. Okay, so option, item F failed, and we're going to move on to item G. And there are, we do need to find consensus, which means 3 of us have to agree on the options or nothing gets recommended to council. So the way that we do in G is we go back to that chart on page 55. Yeah.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Do we need to move that now? And if so, I'd be happy to do it or second it if yourself or another member wanted to.
So it's up to the committee to decide. We have the various combinations, but we also have the 2 types of discounts. It's up to the committee to decide how to deal with it. We can discuss the age-based discounts first, or we can discuss the income-based discounts first. So yeah.
Mr. Chair, 5-minute bio break.
Yes, we'll call a recess. I got to speak about the procedural elements before us. Thank you. Okay, if members could please take their seats, we'll continue on. So we'll just start at the top. The first 4 options are age-based discounts. And just to refresh everyone's memory, option 2 and 3 in combination with option 7, which is the LIM 15 option, were already voted down by council. So if you like option 7, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 at the moment, but if you like option 7, you have to pick 1 or 4, unless 7 fails, right? Because the 2 middle options were already voted down by council. So what I'm looking for... Sorry? I think we questions on the options if people have them. In the interest of time, we're going to lose quorum in about half an hour or less, so we do need to get through deliberations. Councillor Kiley.
Well, I was going to move option G, but you're suggesting that it's open for discussion on any of them right now?
We're not going to do the letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you have to pick 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 out of 5, 6, 7. And if we can find 3 members that agree on the 2, then that combines to one of the options.
So I'd like to move 1 and 7.
We're just going to do 1 at a time. 1 at a time. 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4. What? Well, you can move any option 1 through 7, but we're doing 1 option at a time. Sitchin.
Just to clarify, we split up the options based on discussions from previous presentations so that we can look at the income-based options, which are 5, 6, and 7, and committee can choose which of those 3 income-based options they'd like to put forward. We've done it up as a separate motion So once you decide on income-based, you can then look at the 4 options for age-based, or in the opposite order, whichever way you want to go through them. But we did them as separate resolutions so that you didn't have to come up with a combo that you liked. You could do one or the other if that's, we thought that would be more helpful. So we've got them all on slides. So whichever one you'd like me to put up there, I can put up there. But I think it may be more useful to look at either all the age-based options or all the income-based options and then put one forward and make that decision, if that's helpful.
So procedurally, one of the options, we will have the ability to choose 2, one out of 1 through 4 and one out of 5 through 7, but we get at a time. So someone needs to propose one of the options. Councillor Chappelle.
Propose voting on option number 1, continue current discounts.
Okay, so floor is moved by Councillor New current discounts, seconded Councillor McLaren. Councillor Chappelle, you have the floor.
I'd like to call him.
Okay, that requires a 2/3 vote, or in this case 3/4. All those in favor of calling the question? And that carries. So we are now voting on option 1. All those in favor? And that carries. So, well, that didn't take a lot of deliberation. Now we have to choose from 5, 6, 7. Seeing as option 1 was not one of the ones that was voted down with the combo C and D, we actually can choose any of 5, 6, or 7. There's no restraints. Well, someone needs to move one of the options.
I'd like to propose option 6. Baby steps, baby steps.
Okay, could we get that up on screen, please?
Yep. Oops. Sorry, that should say. That should
on there
say
it says
6.
option 5, but it's actually option 6, Lim AT.
Yes.
Yeah. So option 6, ignore that 5. This is Lim AT. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Lim AT, it's also the option 6 on the chart, is the difference between the options at this point is where the cutoff is. So we currently use LICO, which is the lowest bar. And then Lim AT is the second bar. That's Lim low income, what's it called? After tax, what's the M?
That's the low income measure after tax.
Yeah. And, okay, so that's been moved at number 6. Do you have any comments? We need a seconder to get it on the floor. I'll second it. I'll second it.
Thank you, Your Chair. I'm looking at this as a reasonable option, is we're going from a LICO and then jumping quite a distance in the increase in the subsidy. I think given the uncertain times that lie ahead of us, I think a mid-range is a reasonable option, and that's why I am supporting LMAT. I'm not a Grinch. It's this time of year. I'm not being a Grinch, but I think it's reasonable to the taxpayer to go halfway.
Anyone else? We'll do members of the committee first, and then we'll go to members. Yes.
Of clarification for staff. The percentage of discount that we're talking about in options 5 through 7, is that 20 to 25% like seniors, or is that 50% like it was in option C in the original report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's the 50% for all those 3. The difference between those 3 options is the number of people who would qualify, but what they can receive is exactly the same for all 3 of those options. It's just a larger pool of people, depending on which income threshold you choose.
Right, and to complicate it then, if a senior is making under lim at, if we go with that option or whatever option we choose, do they fall under that bucket or do they fall under the seniors bucket, or is it a combination of the both?
The way it works currently is it's a combination of both. The age-based discount is applied first. So if the age-based discount is 20%, their bus pass cost is reduced by 20%. If they qualify under the income-based program, it's 50% off of that cost. So it's kind of a combo. And that would continue based on the combination you're talking about tonight, because we'd continue the age-based programs as we do and the income-based program. So the way we do it now wouldn't change. It would just be offered to a larger group of people.
Yeah, that's very helpful, actually. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a question for clarity for the committee. So regardless of what we think of the number estimates, how does it look like from staff's perspective with hundreds of applicants for the discounts? So whichever level that we choose, where does the budget provide for the cost, and what happens if we have a high number of applicants?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as you might recall from the previous report, although I don't expect you to remember, it's a little over 4,000 more people would qualify using LIM-AT. We know that many of those folks will never show their face, so not all the people who qualify ever come forward. We think with some changes administratively at the back end with how we provide the discounts, we can absorb some of those even within our current operating budget, but there could come a point in time over the course of the year, especially with those elements of the program that have fixed budgets, Spark being one, our health and dental benefits being another. There will be potentially some pressure on those fixed item budgets. We will keep track of that in the year that we're monitoring it in terms of how many people we had to turn away if in fact we run out of money for pet vouchers or for recreation subsidies, etc. Those programs are always provided on a first come, first serve. So we'll have to just monitor it, but we are making as many administrative changes to compensate, so to speak, for that increase in people. But as mentioned in the report, we're confident we can do that with LIM-AT. We're not as confident if you went up to LIM-15 because that's doubling again the number of people who could be coming through our door, and without having the history on knowing how that population, different from the current population, will access the program. Staff feel it would be better to go to LIM-AT first as a trial and then come back in a year with some concrete numbers of how many more people came through our door than previously when it was LICO.
So, okay, so I hear that the budget can support LIM-AT as an option, and that that there may be a risk with going to a different option, is what I heard. I just wanted to ask a question, though. I didn't want the floor, but so Councillor Kennedy, you still have the floor.
I'm actually, because in quick discussion here on the side, if we were to say that an individual could only qualify for one benefit that is of more benefit to them, that would give more flexibility, correct? So for example, if a senior was making under LIM-AT or LIM-15 or whatever we decide, and that would make them therefore eligible for the 50% discount. If we said that is the discount they get and not plus the seniors discount, that would give a bit more flexibility. So could we change the policy warrant or the trigger or whatever we're calling it for the individual and then have more money and less pressure on the programs that we've just heard about?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we could transit on people coming forward that are part of the Municipal Fee Assistance Program, only receiving, regardless of their age, the 50% discount. There's no one here from transit to speak to the problems that may result from that, but I understand the concept, and we can certainly work that out with transit and recreation to make sure that people aren't, for lack of another term, double dipping. And I don't mean to sound that they're doing anything wrong, but basically our current system allows for them to get 2 different discounts.
So I'm going to jump in here. Yeah, I was going to ask CAO if this would require an amendment or any further language when it goes to council.
So, through Mr. Chair, we would probably need to amend the policy to reflect wording that they would be eligible to one discount, whichever discount provides the greatest, essentially, subsidy. So if it's based on age or income, but that would also apply for youth discounts, because I know we're not really talking about youth, but they are also getting double discounts right now. So I'm assuming we could change that in the policy and make it essentially just eligible for one type of discount.
Would that change require direction, like explicit direction in the motion to council?
Through you, no, because currently I don't think it's actually even stated in the policy. It's just been a procedure that's been implemented. So what we would do is we would provide clarification in the policy.
And we would have to inform those youth that we're getting both discounts, that one of the discounts has changed and now you're only eligible for one. We'd have to explain that to each one. Okay, you're back to you, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you. With that, I'm trying to weigh, based on a rough approximation of seeing these numbers, of how many people would lose what amount. And, well, it's a model, so we can trust it as much as we trust the assumptions, which are fine. Yeah, this makes it actually more challenging, but probably better policy in the long run, because it will be able to carry more people and the program capacity will be less stress, but it actually might be somewhat punitive for those who are already getting both, in the sense that, punitive in the sense that they're going to perhaps get less if we were to move to a single eligibility and not, again, double dipping. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, their subsidy would definitely be reduced if they were only eligible for one type of discount and not both anymore, for those where it would apply.
Mm-hmm. And do we have any sense on the number of people? Sorry to put you on the spot. I know that's layering a few things at once, but that would be important for me in making that decision. If it's going to be a few people, that can easily be explained to, or if it's going to be thousands of people, that will see a marked difference.
So again, looking back at the last report where I had a chart with how many people were eligible, in the case of seniors, there are very few seniors who are currently using LICO eligible for the income-based discounts. So the majority of seniors are getting the smaller 20-25% discounts. So it's, less than 1,000 seniors. I think it's like 668 who were potentially eligible for the double discount, and out of those smaller numbers, we're actually using those discounts. So there's not a huge impact. And again, the numbers for youth, because it's 18 to 24, is also a pretty small number. So the change wouldn't impact large numbers of people because they're not using the discount currently. The majority of seniors who would now qualify for the income-based discounts will get a greater discount than they've been receiving up till now.
Yeah, that's good. And so, final question for me for now. If we were to pick, say, 7, and this is hypothetical again, but it'd be likely that more people would qualify for the program of deeper discount than those who would potentially lose the double discount. I think that's
Yes, absolutely.
apparent.
There's between 4,000 and 5,000 people who would now qualify for LIM, and if you moved up to LIM 15, it basically doubles that number again, based on 2016 census data.
So my preference, and I'm not sure how this fits procedurally, so call me out of order if I am, is to say no to LIM move to LIM 15 with a single eligibility mechanism.
All you've argued against and to use number 6. Okay, Councillor McLaren, do you wish to speak? Okay, we'll go to visiting councillors. Councillor Neal, to item 6, which is the LIM AT.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Spell.
Trying to get numbers. I was told that we have 277 senior passes issued. 277, not the 1,000, not the 6,000 potential. The numbers are very small. That would this participate.
Okay. Councillor Neal.
Yeah, question, a quick kind of procedural comment. Any motion passed by this committee when it goes to council is open for any amendment as long as it's not contrary to the intent. So what you're talking about could be achieved either as an amendment here or an amendment at council. The quick question I have, and I'll wait till the clerk's done talking to the... Hi. Sorry. With the reduction, with choosing either one or the other, I know how that would work because I'm familiar with the bus program. But recreational programs, and probably even more critical, dental assistance programs, would that loss be great? Would that loss be fairly substantial if I was a senior and whatever limb or LICO that is chosen, would that put me in jeopardy of not having sufficient money to do that?
Through your chair, the only of the municipal fee assistance program that also have an age-based option are recreation and transit. So in terms of the health benefits, pet vouchers, et cetera, those are only available to low-income households. So it makes no difference. There's not opportunity for getting double discounts. So to answer your question, it's a small that would be impacted on recreation and or transit. And everybody else doesn't have access unless they
Thank you
qualify.
for that clarification.
Okay, so we're discussing option 6, which is Lim AT. I guess, does anyone else wish to speak? So I'll call the question. All those in favor of option number 6? All those opposed? And that fails. So now there's 2 options left, 5 and 7. Who would like to move one? Councillor Kiley.
I'll move 7.
We need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor McLaren. You have the floor.
Thank you. And through the last set of questions, my thoughts have been exposed, which is with greater flexibility on, well, actually with a tighter restriction on who is eligible, having one type of eligibility as opposed to layering them, it gives some flexibility on the budget, which we heard could have been a constraint, but that's freed up a bit. The other thing I want to say is this is for a 2-year pilot project. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, actually the as it's worded up there is to come back in a year to give you an update. It can continue for as long as, but we felt as staff, if we make this change, we could come back in a year and give you some updated information on who's accessing the program and how this change has impacted the program, and then you can make further decisions from there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to add that the time frame, though, may be different. This speaks to being effective January 1st, based on our fees and charges bylaw that has already been issued to council. The start could be later than January 1st, 2020.
Okay, but we still have an opportunity within our council term to course correct or tweak as needed based on data that emerges from this option. All right, and so I've made the point many times in committee before, at council. I think that if we're going for a program that, as it says in the report, is intended to help those who need help, who need financial support, by moving to LIM 15, we're bringing in minimum wage workers, the basic calculation of $14.50 or $14.25 an hour, 35 hours a week for 50 weeks a year. That will allow those people, and especially their children, to qualify for this, which I think is exceptionally important because they're so financially stressed that this could be a game changer for them to receive such a deep discount at 50%. I recognize the potential budgetary stress, but I think we've started to address ways that we can deal with that, and then within a year we can come back and look at the numbers and find out really how much it will cost, which I think also will address Councillor Chappelle's concerns expressed earlier. So please vote in favor of this. I think it does well for the people that the policy is intended to serve. And I also think that it's kind of nice in some ways that it could ultimately represent a consensus because we're keeping seniors discounts, and that will appease many members of council who are in favor of it. So this is the best of both worlds. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Chappelle.
I really object to combining the math here. The math, well, I'm really hoping that the report that comes back within a year actually has hard data, math. I really object to the idea of saying that you're using one stick to beat the other, because they're two separate items altogether. I do appreciate the insight you looked at with using one discount over the other and not double dipping. I don't think we do double coupons in Canada. I'm surprised we did double dipping on this thing. I just caution you that anytime we bring something forward as a pilot, all that means is you're deferring permanency for 1 year or whatever long the pilot is. And eventually this, never mind.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, we'll call the question on option 7. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries 3-1. Yeah, so we're not quite done because I'd like to ask staff if now that we've decided what to recommend, if this should go to the council meeting on December 17th. And if so, we need a motion to put it on the addeds.
Through you, the option around age-based discounts, there's no urgency because the option you've chose is the status quo option, so we'll just continue with what we're currently doing around age discounts. And for option 7, again, as soon as it's approved, we can make those changes through our application process. We put January 1st without understanding that you wanted to make that change to the double level of discounts, which will impact our rates and fees bylaw and require us to make some changes. So I'm not, at this point, we can't pull that off for January 1st, but we can certainly do it within the first quarter of 2020. But in terms of urgency to have it next week, we can't make it happen for January 1st anyway at this point. So it could wait till the first meeting in January if that makes the process easier.
So that's procedurally, we have to choose if we want this to go to December 17th or January 7th. So I'll take a motion to either way. Actually, you only need a motion if you want to speed it up. If not, it goes to January 7th. Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Thank you very much. So item, and I understand we may soon lose quorum, so let's move quickly. Item, where are we? FG. I've lost my place here. Item H, review of right of entry bylaw number 99-167. There is a recommendation. Which staff will introduce this? Ms. Keppener-Hunt.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Council passed a motion in August of this year directing staff to report back to the Administrative Policies Committee with a review of the best practices of other municipalities and provide recommendations to amend or replace bylaw number 99-167. The purpose of the motion was to ensure the property rights are honored and due notification is always given. So the report before you contains the review of similar right of entry bylaws in 9 Ontario municipalities, 3 of which use a permit system to authorize right of entry onto adjoining land, and 6 of the 9 have enacted a permissive bylaw granting an express right of entry to neighboring properties. Our current right of entry bylaw permits access to the neighboring property for the purpose of making repairs or alterations for 10 days without any notification being given to the adjacent property owner. So staff are recommending 6 additional improvements be made to the wording to address the concerns brought up in the motion. And staff is recommending the proposed bylaw attached as Exhibit E to the report to address these best practices.
Thank you. So questions from members of the public? Sorry, Councillor Spell.
I'm going to ask, through your chair, Ms. Hunt, how informative the process was looking at this good neighbor policy, and was there anything that surprised you that you thought, wow, that's a great idea to have to augment what we're doing in Kingston?
You, Mr. Chair. Are you asking about the right of entry bylaw or the good neighbor guideline? Okay, so the report we're talking is the right of entry bylaw.
Members of the public? I've been told by one of our members he has to leave in less than 10 minutes, at which point the meeting will end.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looks like excellent work, and I just have one additional suggestion. In cases where there may be more than one way to do the work, that a condition of maximum safety be examined. That might be an additional clause. Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Staff has a chance to respond to the member of the public.
Safety was not something that was brought up in any of the other bylaws. Most of the bylaws were permissive to leave the decisions to be between property owners and not the municipality.
Great. Now we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Kiley, second by Councillor McLaren, that the AP committee recommends to council that bylaw bylaw to permit an owner or occupant of any building to enter upon adjoining land for the purpose of making repairs or alterations to such building, and to repeal bylaw number 99-167 as per Exhibit E to report number AP 20-004 be approved. Any discussion? Councillor Neal.
Just very quickly, I want to thank seconder, Councillor Chappelle, who had the same legitimate concerns about property rights as I had, and this was a constituent's complaint that came to me. And I want to thank staff. We had a really thorough meeting with staff, and everything that's in this recommended bylaw were points that were brought up, legitimate points. So I want to thank you. And I just want to comment, I spent most of the day watching the impeachment, and it's really good to see some bipartisan work being done on our council.
Okay, so I'll call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. There's two items left, I and J. How much time do you have left, Councillor Kiley?
I'm really sorry to say I'm 7 minutes max.
Okay, I propose that we move to item J, because I believe there are members of the public that are here to speak to the living wage item, and they won't be able to once we lose quorum. The item I is not time sensitive. Yeah. Anyways, it's up to the committee. I'm moving that we move item J up to the next item. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kiley, all those in favor? Carried. So we're going to item J, living wage. We have an information report from Community Services, if you'd like to introduce it. That would be, I guess, Mr. Hugenboss.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to report that based on Council's direction, the city is now a certified living wage employer as of today, and based on the direction from Council for full-time permanent staff. Unfortunately, staff are not in a position to provide any detail on procurement procedures as directed by staff, but we'll be back in April with that after some engagement process and following the direction from the Council motion. Thank you.
So there is a part to this, which is the procurement living wage policy, which will come in April. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Kiley.
Really quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair. To staff, In the report, it mentioned part-time and full-time, and then in the actual policy, it was only full-time. Could you just speak to the difference?
Yes, through you, Chair. So we actually qualify for both. The minimum level is just full-time, but all our part-time permanent staff is also meeting the living wage requirement. So we achieve above the minimum standard for living wage.
Thank you. And quick follow-up is, there's no chance that part-time employees could fall below that threshold because they're already making above it? Is that the thinking?
We don't envision that happening.
Thank you.
Great. Congratulations, City of Kingston. And anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you. Answered one question. In the actual policy, it indicates that that the adjustment to the living wage will occur only at the anniversary of contracts. Is that the right interpretation?
Go ahead, Brad.
Through you, yes, that is correct. We have to respect the employment contracts.
Can it not be built into the employment contract that it will be adjusted annually?
Through you, yes, we could negotiate that into the contracts at the time of settlement or renegotiation.
Right. Well, I'd have to make a statement of some sort, so it's just questions, right? Okay, if we wish to pursue that, how would we go about that?
If council was to desire that, then that would require a motion, I assume. I will defer to the CAO hurdle.
So thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So if this is something council would like to include as part of the contracts that are being negotiated, because we have different unions, obviously, we always go to council before we initiate collective agreement negotiation. So this is where council can give us direction in terms of what they'd like to see in the contracts as well.
Okay, one further question. We just concluded some labor contracts. I'm not sure this applies. Well, I think some of them or all of them are above the living wage, but will they be? Would they be affected? Would those contracts just concluded in the last year be affected by this policy, or in either positively or negatively?
So yes, all full-time and part-time permanent employees with the city are above the minimum living wage, not minimum wage, but the living wage threshold. So the city is certified at full-time and part-time permanent staff. So that includes any of the unions that do exist for permanent staff.
Thank you.
I have a staff about the potential procurement policy. How would we calculate living wage for contractors that may pay piecework? There may not be any, but when I was a tree planter, and I know we do have the potential of hiring tree planting companies with our policy. How would we do it if they don't get an hourly wage? If it's by the work?
Thank you. Yes, so that will be part of the public and stakeholder engagement. There will be options that staff will have to look at for how it can be applied to the procurement process and look at strategies of how to assess whether it's a level of living wage or matching what the city does and for certain size contracts or certain size of work. So that's the work that we have to do as staff and bring back to this committee. That's a good point.
Thank you. Members of the public have a chance to comment or ask questions.
I appreciated, thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate Councillor Hutchinson's question about, I think it was Hutchinson, anyway, about part-time or workers. It seems to me in reading the documents that it's not policy, and that I think it should be ingrained in policy that pro rata, part-time workers also get be assured a fair living wage. I also think students should be included. You know, there's this I worry about systemic process, that we put in, by not including such things, the system is built in a goal or incentive not to hire people, to find ways of not to hire people at full wage, and that undermines the availability of work to others at full wage. Therefore, I think it should be the policy that everybody, no matter what their age, is treated the same and they have a living wage. Especially for part-time workers, of course, because we see throughout industry this idea we can hire someone at a cheaper rate at part-time, not without the benefits, and therefore we don't have to hire full-time people. And we see the deterioration in the community and the deterioration in the work situation of people, insecure work. And anyway, thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak?
Just very briefly, I'll say congratulations and thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? There's a microphone here.
I'm Tara Kaner, and I'm chair of Living Wage Kingston, and I was part of the Poverty Roundtable when the push to achieve living wage for employers in the city of Kingston was initiated. That was in 2011, so it's now 2019. It's been a long time and a long fight, but I want to thank city staff very much for all the work they put into this, and also to members of the committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public? Yeah, just make sure the microphone's on and state your name.
Hi, first timer at City Council meetings. I just want to reiterate the concern about collective bargaining. Many times collective bargaining takes more than a short period of time. It can take years, in fact. So the danger that we see here of having employees potentially being paid less than an adjusted living wage for the remaining 2 years of a contract, and then in addition to that, potentially the years that it takes for the contract negotiation process to take place, runs the risk of having employees being paid less than an adjusted living wage for years on end. So I hope that's taken into consideration in the drafting of policy.
Thank you. Members of the public? Staff has the opportunity to respond.
Real quick, the policy was based on council direction for full-time permanent staff. And I reiterate again that also permanent part-time staff does qualify, and part of the living wage certification is including benefits, which are unionized part-time staff also receive a package of benefits in addition to wage, which factors in. So thank you.
Thank you. Just like us, we're part-time staff. All right, well, maybe if that's it for item J, we can quickly vote on item I, knowing that if we start to get into deliberations, we will lose quorum. So looking for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation from the Good Neighbor Guidelines. Councillor Chappelle, Councillor McLaren? Before we do, though, I should ask, is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this item? Okay, we'll call the question on the recommendation that the Administrative Policies Committee recommend to Council that the City of Kingston Good Neighbor Guidelines attached as Exhibit B, AP 20-003, be approved as presented. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries unanimously. Thank you. The next meeting is, there was an item of correspondence, by the way, from Tara Kiner, and the next meeting is February 13th, 2020. Because we completed the agenda, we don't need to